Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Emil Robinson Smith will be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Our Stephen Young is running the technical operations of the broadcast this morning. Our photographer, Adam Bernstein, is out preparing to track this Falcon 9 rocket, do some still photography as well. Michael Kane has the morning off. That said, if you'd like to follow their work on their social channels, you can find Michael at MD Kane Jr. and Adam at ABurnNYC on X, formerly known as Twitter. While you're over there, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. We'll also be joined by our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, and you can see our live view from Chuck and Jem Briggs over there, taking a look at the Falcon 9 rocket, sitting at the heart of Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. We're now T-minus 57 minutes, 16 seconds and counting away from the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket with a pair of Earth imaging satellites on behalf of company Maxar. As we were getting going this morning, the Brevard County Emergency Operations Center has activated their launch support operations team. Preparation for the mission, getting ready to launch during a 60-minute window that SpaceX has for this Falcon flight. Window running from 9 to 10 a.m. this morning. If for whatever reason SpaceX is not able to launch today, they do have a 3-hour backup window tomorrow, which opens up at 9 a.m. Eastern, 1300 UTC for our friends joining around the world. Certainly appreciate the nearly 1,000 of you who are joining with us live as we kick things off on a Thursday morning. Hope you've all had a good and productive work week, or perhaps the last hurrahs of summer vacation. I know school has been getting underway for a number of districts around the country here in the U.S., so hopefully if your kiddos did go back to school this week, it's been a good first week back. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that like button as you're stepping on into our live coverage this morning. Certainly helps the YouTube algorithm recognize that folks are here and engaged, and it'll help bring more people into our live coverage, and we would certainly appreciate that. I want to thank Callistia Lee, one of our wonderful moderators, for being up with us this morning, helping to manage things in the live chat. Be sure to give her a hello if you haven't already, and you can help her out by if you have a question that could possibly be answered by the description in the video box below the live stream, just go ahead and give that a quick peruse. It may answer a number of the questions that you have about this mission. Also, tempting though it may be, we respectfully ask that you refrain from using all caps or engaging in overtly political dialogue. This is not the forum for either of those, and that's a quick way to get your message blocked. So again, you could help our moderators out by just doing those simple things. Otherwise, enjoy each other's company Feel free to chat about generally whatever, and you can also use the YouTube Super Chat feature if you have a comment or question for us, and your comment or question is appropriate to be read on the show. We'd love to bring you into the dialogue about this mission or any other happenings on the Space Beat. Lastly, we're powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube, so thanks to folks like Cam Research, M. Teresa, Sulfur for Lunch, The Rocket Girl, Clever Girl. Oh, Clever Girl's back as a channel member. Lovely. Zeus's Mommy, Leslie Daniel, Wendy Kelshaw, John Torrance, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop. That is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course, the ability to watch all of our launch liftoff moments in 4K. With all that housekeeping out of the way, we are T-minus 52 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. We're about 14 minutes away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of propellant load for today's Falcon 9 launch. We try to be cognizant of the fact that anyone's first time here could be this launch that we're covering at the moment. So let's go ahead and step through the countdown timeline, let you know the milestones that we're anticipating as SpaceX gets into the fueling process. We'll just say up top, again, they have a 1-hour launch window today. So as long as they have not begun fueling, they do have the latitude to move that T0 time. About an hour out from launch, there is a T-minus 1 hour weather briefing just to get a lay of the land before they step into fueling. Gives them a good overview of things. About T-minus 38 minutes, the SpaceX launch director will conclude the poll for the start of propellant load. If SpaceX is in a good position to do so, they can take that poll early. This is done electronically, not by a voice poll as some other launch providers do. But once that go-ahead is given, fueling starts at the T-minus 35-minute mark with the loading of both RP1 or rocket-grade kerosene as well as liquid oxygen. RP1 is loaded onto both the first and second stages of the Falcon 9, and liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. About T-minus 34 minutes, 30 seconds, they'll start chilling the helium ground systems. That cryogenic helium is loaded onto the pressure vessels on the first stage, about the 30-minute mark. You can see here. About 4 minutes later, onto the second stage. T-minus 26 minutes. It's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. About 3 minutes after that, the loading of second stage kerosene concludes. And at T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, the strong back chill down process begins, which you see manifest itself as the so-called big vent. It's a good visual indication that fueling is proceeding on time with the mission, and that sets up the last big fueling milestone yet to begin at this point. That is T-minus 16 minutes, where second stage liquid oxygen load begins. Moving on, the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines gets underway at T-minus 7 minutes. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps. Helps protect the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank is full. In T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds, the strong back retract sequence begins. That process starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, or the strong back, it'll recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes prior to liftoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. A minute after that, same is true on the second stage, at which point the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin 1D engines are healthy and ignite, Falcon 9 will leap off the pad at T0. It's currently, again, targeting the opening of the launch window at 9 a.m. Eastern, 1300 UTC. T-minus 47 minutes, 12 seconds. Currently T-minus 44 minutes, 48 seconds and counting. Just about 6 minutes and some change away from the point at which the SpaceX launch director will need to make a call on the startup prop load if, in fact, SpaceX is still targeting the opening of the launch window today. Talked about the countdown timeline. Let's go ahead and discuss where this rocket is going to be flying once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? Last time SpaceX launched satellites for Maxar, these Worldview Legion satellites, that was from Vandenberg Space Force Base over on the west coast. This launch and the third and final for this series of satellites will be launching from here in Florida, heading up to a mid-inclination orbit. Once the Falcon 9 leaves the pad here over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Slick 40, or Space Launch Complex 40, will fly in a slightly northeasterly trajectory, but as you can see with the red line there, this is a RTLS, or Return to Landing Site operation for SpaceX, and as such, those in Brevard County, and especially in Brevard County, I should say, but also potentially in other parts of Central Florida, may hear a sonic boom as that first stage booster is making its way back towards LZ1, or Landing Zone 1, also at the Cape. So if you yourself are here, or if you have friends or family in the area who may not be fully awake, you may just want to flag them real quick and let them know that there may be a little rumble a little less than 8 minutes after liftoff. SpaceX is also intending to recover the payload fairings for this mission. They sent out one of their recovery vessels, Bob, in support of this operation today. SpaceX saves about $6 million per recovery effort, so they strive to do so with each mission. As you can see in this picture from a SpaceX presentation earlier this year, fairing halves splashed down in the Atlantic Ocean under the support of parachutes, and they are brought aboard the recovery vessel, as you can see here in this image. As I mentioned, the recovery vessel on tap today is named Bob, after Bob Behnken, one half of the duo who flew aboard SpaceX's Demo 2 mission back on May 30th of 2020. SpaceX continuing to make progress towards its goal of ideally launching about 144 missions this year. Slight setback, of course, in July as their Falcon 9 rocket was grounded for a couple of weeks. Here's where we currently stand on the Falcon family flying so far in 2024. 79 missions on the year. That includes one from the Falcon Heavy rocket, of course, back on June 25th, sending up the NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration here in the United States, their GOES-U satellite back in late June. We're now T-minus 39 minutes, 12 seconds and counting, just about a minute away from the point at which SpaceX needs to make the call on the start of prop load, again, if they are in a position to launch right at the beginning of the window at 9. Now T-minus 37 minutes, 28 seconds and counting. If SpaceX is continuing to target the opening of the window today. Taking a look more at the mission at hand, here are the two relevant mission patches for today's operation. The one on the left, of course, is from Maxar themselves. The one on the right from SpaceX, as evidenced by their pretty standard now these days four-leaf clover, sign of good luck, embedded in, I believe, all their mission patches designed by SpaceX. You can see here, these are the Worldview Legion satellites as they were in a clean room at the Maxar facilities in Palo Alto, California, before they were shipped out here to Florida. Each of these spacecraft are about 3 meters by 2 meters by 2 meters, or about 9.6 feet by 6.6 by 6.6 in size. Before they were fueled up, they have a dry mass of about 630 kilograms. It's about nearly 1,390 pounds. They will go into an orbit at an altitude of 518 kilometers or 321 miles. You can see here in this GIF from Maxar, this is a sort of roundabout look as the spacecraft were preparing to be encapsulated by those SpaceX payload fairings. Ones you see there now live in the pictures there on the right hand side of your screen are a live view from the press site of the SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. Again, this will be the second of 3 planned launches for Maxar this year. The first one launching back on May 2nd. We're anticipating one more later this year as well. We're now at T-minus 34 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. Again, assuming SpaceX is targeting the opening of the window, they will have begun fueling now. It's going to be a little bit tricky to see our normal signs of evidence of fueling this morning, just given where the sun's position is and the fact that it's very much backlighting the rocket here. So hopefully in the next few minutes we will get confirmation from SpaceX that fueling has in fact begun. We will keep our eyes out for that. Here's a still image of those satellites as they were being set aboard their deploying mechanism. We do actually have word now that SpaceX says propellant load has begun on the Falcon 9, preparing for launch today. They say, and I will quote here, "All systems are looking good. Weather is currently 70% favorable for liftoff," which, if you happen to read our article heading into today's launch opportunity, that is about 10% worse than what the 45th Weather Squadron was forecasting heading into today. They put it at about 80% favorable for liftoff, with the cumulus clouds being in the area. A little bit hard to see from, again, our wide camera just because things are a bit washed out, just given where the sun is. Was a bit of storm activity offshore. Just looking out the window here. Again, try not to stare into the sun, but to see sort of what the cloud layer is like. It's not dramatically thick, but there are some clouds hanging around in the area. And just looking at the radar that we have here in our office, there again still is a bit of storm activity offshore as well, but given the trajectory of where it's going, that may not prove to be an issue. But again, if SpaceX does need to pivot to a backup window tomorrow, if they're not able to launch today, they do have a 3-hour window which opens at 9 a.m. tomorrow. No restrictions on weather right now, it appears. You can see some of that offshore activity here on this chart. There's that view I was just mentioning a second ago. And you can see some much more dramatic tropical activity happening to the southeast of us there, but that's not the primary concern. You can see here an image from a GOES satellite of some of the cloud activity. This would be GOES east. Currently T-minus 27 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. The last few minutes, cryogenic helium has begun to be loaded on board the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. Same is said to happen in about a minute on the second stage. Again, that helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. As we're now into fueling, I want to thank the more than 2,300 of you who are watching with us live this morning. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. It'll allow the YouTube algorithm to recognize that there are more folks here, bring some more people into our live coverage. Also want to thank Callistia Lee for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships earlier in the broadcast. Really appreciate that bit of generosity. And to our 5 newest channel members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. And we hope you stick around. It is a busy morning for SpaceX as we are currently at the T-minus 24-minute mark thereabouts, as they prepare for this Falcon 9 launch here in Florida. Over at Starbase in South Texas, thanks to these live views from our friends at Lab Padre. You can see the latest section of the Starship support tower being stacked this morning. This is the 7th of these modules. SpaceX continuing to progress towards the 5th launch of its Starship rocket. An approximate launch date has not been announced by SpaceX, though based on the most recent comments from Elon Musk, it appears that it could happen as soon as around the late August, early September timeframe, but again, that is with regulatory approval. While that's happening in South Texas, back here in Florida, they are preparing for their next crewed mission, which is going to be launching from Pad 39A here at the Kennedy Space Center. Saw the booster for this mission heading out to the hangar yesterday. In fact, this will be for the commercial astronaut mission dubbed Polaris Dawn, once again being led by businessman Jared Isaacman. He and 3 others will spend about 5 days on orbit and conduct the first private spacewalk in history. And that's in addition to some other milestones that they're looking to achieve, such as a Starlink demonstration from Dragon and many others. Of course, we'll have extensive reporting on this in these next couple weeks as Jared and the team are targeting a launch from this pad coming up no earlier than August 26th. So for a crewed launch right around the corner. Meanwhile, over on the West Coast, SpaceX is preparing for a transporter rideshare mission, that being Transporter 11. Set to launch potentially as soon as tomorrow. We're T-minus 20 minutes, 13 seconds and counting, and you can see the so-called big vent now underway here at the pad. These crews are chilling the feed lines prior to second stage liquid oxygen load. This venting will continue until about T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds. T-minus 16 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. Less than 10 seconds remaining on this big vent here. As you can see, it's starting to taper off. Again, this will set up second stage LOX load. Want to thank Jen XLS for the $4 super chat. Based on the emoji, I'm guessing it's heading off to the coffee and caffeine fund for us, which is always appreciated. Also want to thank channel member Michael McGrory for joining us this morning and gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Michael. To our newest 5 channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. Remember, channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. The ability to watch all of our launch liftoff moments here in 4K and access to member-only videos. Now T-minus 15 minutes, 7 seconds and counting, about a minute into second stage liquid oxygen loading. As we continue to progress through the countdown, let's go ahead and briefly talk about the booster history of this particular Falcon 9 rocket, tail number 1076 in the SpaceX fleet, going for launch number 16 today. So before that happens, here's where this rocket has been. First launching back on November 26, 2022 from Pad 39A. This was the Commercial Resupply Services mission number 26, or CRS-26, sending a cargo Dragon spacecraft up to the International Space Station with more than 7,700 pounds of cargo and science in tow. Second launch came on January 10th. This was OneWeb Flight 16. This was the second of 3 dedicated launches for the OneWeb satellites, or its constellation. Of course, after Russia invaded Ukraine, OneWeb lost the Soyuz rocket as a launch vehicle, then bought 3 flights from SpaceX and 2 from India to complete its remaining constellation missions. Next flight was a batch of Starlink satellites for SpaceX on February 27th. This was the Starlink 6-1 mission, notable because it was also the first time SpaceX launched the V2 mini variety of Starlink satellites. Next up, April 7th of 2023, when it launched the Intelsat 40E mission. This communication satellite also included a hosted NASA payload called the Tropospheric Emissions Monitoring of Pollution, or TEMPO. It's a UV visible spectrometer that monitors air pollutants hourly across North America. Launches 5 through 8 were all Starlink flights. Those were 6-3 on May 19th, 6-6 on July 24th, and 6-14 on September 9th. Also 6-21 on October 5th. Launch number 9 was the O3B M-Power number 5 and 6 satellites. That was on behalf of Luxembourg-based company SES. 10th launch was the Ovzon 3 communication satellite on behalf of Ovzon. That was back on January 3rd, 2024. Launch 11 was a batch of 23 Starlink satellites. That was Starlink 6-40 on February 29th. It was followed by the launch of Eutelsat 36D for French satellite operator Eutelsat on March 30th. After that, a pair of Starlink satellites, 6-54 on April 28th and 6-64 on June 1st. And most recently, Turksat 6A, that was on July 8th. Currently T-minus 10 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. By our record, we have this as the 200th SpaceX launch from Pad 40 coming up. This will also be the 255th overall launch from Slick 40 to date. Running down the Falcon 9 vehicle before it gets ready to fly. It stands at 70 meters or 229 feet tall, and has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that is made up by the Falcon 9's first stage, the bottom 2/3 of the rocket. As we just ran down, it has flown 15 times before, looking for number 16 today. The base of the first stage are 9 Merlin 1D engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage back at LZ1 or Landing Zone 1, following stage separation. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9. This comes back through the atmosphere tail first like a big old dart. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. And at first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches. 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust. It'll be fired just once on today's flight prior to the deployment of the satellites. Again, sending them to a mid-inclination orbit. Above the second stage, at the very top of the stack, are the payload fairings. Bearings are made above a carbon composite material and are 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. 2 aft, the payload fairing will be recovered a little further downrange by the recovery vessel Bob, returned to Port Canaveral and then subsequently Cape Canaveral for refurbishment, and then turned around for reuse. Again, the Falcon 9 first stage will be returning for a landing at Landing Zone 1, so important to note for those here in Brevard County or on Florida's Space Coast, as well as in the broader Central Florida area. You may hear a sonic boom as the Falcon 9 makes its return. Now T-minus 6 minutes, 44 seconds and counting. The engine chill down sequence is now underway. That involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank the now more than 7,300 of you who are watching with us live in the last few minutes before liftoff. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you'd hit that like button for us. It allows more folks to find their way into our live coverage, and we would certainly appreciate it. I also want to thank one of our wonderful channel members, SG, for a $5 super chat. A thumbs up, Corgi, a sign of good luck for this mission. Appreciate that, SG. Good to see you this morning. While this is the second launch of Maxar's Worldview Legion satellites, slightly different than the last time that they launched. Again, they're heading to a mid-inclination orbit. As opposed to the polar orbit that the last two launched to. Taking a look at the last time SpaceX launched them, that was the deployment of the satellites, and here an animation of the Worldview Legion along with Maxar's other satellites. These are Earth imaging satellites, of course, and one of Maxar's promotional points for launching this mission is that once all 6 of these satellites are on board, acting in concert with some of their other Earth-observing satellites, that they'll be able to offer a revisit from an orbital perspective to its customers up to 15 times per day. And you can see this particular pair of payload fairings emblazoned with the mission logo for Maxar. So we're now 4 minutes, 14 seconds ahead of liftoff. The strong back retract sequence has started. In just a second, you'll see the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up. Then the transporter erector, or the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. You can see those clamp arms opening up right now there on your screen. One last bit of housekeeping as we prepare to see the launch in less than 4 minutes. You'll notice our countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen. Slightly different than what you're seeing from the SpaceX feed in the big box. Reason being, our countdown clock is in real time. SpaceX feed is coming in on a slight delay. So we will be making our callouts based off of real time, of course, since the majority of the views you will see during our launch coverage in the ascent will be happening from our tracking cameras from Adam, Pete, and Chuck. We're now T-minus 3 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. Coming upon the end of loading liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9's first stage tanks. Did hear confirmation for first stage LOX load completion. About 10 seconds away, thereabouts, from second stage LOX load being complete. Less than 2 minutes to liftoff. do have confirmation that second stage liquid oxygen load is complete. At this point, the Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. What you're seeing here are the ground gas closeouts. That is the extra venting that you're seeing there at the pad. Now less than a minute and a half to liftoff. Part of the ground gas closeouts are venting of the transporter erector LOX line. About 45 seconds to liftoff. Vehicle is in startup. We're listening for the launch director's go for launch. We do have confirmation that we are go for launch. Now less than 30 seconds to lift off. 20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket, sending up 2 Maxar Worldview Legion satellites. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Start to see a series of events in fairly rapid succession. In T plus 2 minutes and 15 seconds will be first stage main engine cutoff or MECO. That'll be followed 3 seconds later by stage separation. Then the first stage will begin its flip maneuver, T plus 2 minutes 22 seconds. That'll be followed 4 seconds later by the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine. The boost back burn will begin, sending the rocket back towards landing zone 1. And then just after the 3-minute mark, the payload fairings will be deployed. The boost back burn ending at T plus 3 minutes and 7 seconds. We're just now less than 10 seconds away from MECO. You see MECO. Separation. And there you see ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine. Stage 1 begins to flip. Boost back burn underway. You can see a little bit of the glow on that. Boost back burn has about a little more than 30 seconds left on it. Now 3 minutes into flight, coming up on stage separation in just a couple seconds here. You'll see those views from the SpaceX onboard camera on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Unfortunately, we didn't see that, but, oh, well, a bit of a... some jumping around from those onboard cameras there, so unfortunately we didn't actually see the payload fairings deploy, but you did briefly see the Maxar satellite for just a second there. Now coming up on the 4th minute into flight. The boost back burn has concluded. And we are about 2 minutes away from the first stage entry burn beginning. Should have some pretty spectacular views of that from our cameras here on the ground. SpaceX confirms that telemetry is nominal so far on this mission. Again, just as a heads up, there will be a sonic boom that will be heard by folks here at the Space Coast and potentially in other parts of Central Florida as this first stage booster is making its way back down towards landing zone 1 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And just as a heads up, LZ-1, while it's currently being used for SpaceX's landing operations, in a couple of years it'll be used to launch missions for a company called Viaspace, which is based here on the Space Coast, as well as Phantom Space. That transition process is really set to kick into gear starting about a year from now. Now, about 5.5 minutes into this flight, we're just about 30 seconds away from the start of that entry burn. Again, just as a reminder, the big box you're seeing here on the screen is in real time from P. Carson's tracking camera. The 2 boxes on the right-hand side of your screen are SpaceX onboard camera views, which coming from the SpaceX feed, which is on a slight delay. So look for right there, that entry burn beginning. Burn just concluding now in real time. You can see it now from the SpaceX onboard cameras again on a slight delay, which is why there's some dissonance. Now 6 minutes 40 seconds into flight, coming up on the first stage landing burn, T plus 7 minutes and 18 seconds. Some great views of Florida Space Coast from the SpaceX onboard cameras on the first stage. We're now 10 seconds away from the landing burning beginning. Some great tracking views from our team here. There's the landing burn. Listening for the sonic boom as it makes its descent. There go the landing legs. And a successful touchdown. And the sonic boom. And as an instant replay from the SpaceX feed, again you can see a good touchdown of the Falcon 9, landing for a 16th time. And a helicopter going through. Again, completing the 16th successful liftoff and landing for this booster. You can see SECO 1, the Merlin vacuum engine, has now concluded its first burn. It is now entered into a nominal orbit. We're now at T plus 9 minutes, 22 seconds and counting into this mission. There is only one burn prior to the deployment of the 2 Worldview Legion satellites today. Deployment of the first satellite is at T plus 47 minutes, 21 seconds. That'll be followed a little more than an hour after that, T plus 1 hour, 49 minutes, 38 seconds, with the deployment of the second of these 2 satellites. As far as the Worldview Legion constellation, though, these are satellites number 3 and 4, the first 2 heading to a mid-inclination orbit. At this point, though, here's what we're going to do. Because there is an excessive lead time between these 2 deployments. Actually, taking a live look right now at one of those satellites there, getting ready to be deployed. You can see the trajectory here on your screen. We're going to go ahead and begin to wind down our live coverage here on this dedicated stream. But if you'd like to continue following along with this mission, we will continue to have these live pictures available on our 24-hour live channel, that is Launchpad Live, right here on YouTube. So you can stick around and see the deployment of these 2 satellites for yourself as they happen in real time. Taking a look at our live chat, want to thank Michael McRory for a $2 super chat marking the 200th SpaceX launch from Pad 40 today. So we're now a little more than 11 minutes into this mission, getting some great onboard camera views of both the Merlin vacuum engine and a second ago just saw one of the Maxar satellites. So as we begin to close things out, let's turn now to our mission stats as they currently stand. Now we've had a successful liftoff and landing of the first stage booster, marking its 16th flight. This was the 364th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 79th Falcon 9 launch of 2024. This was SpaceX's 308th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 82nd launch of the year. That includes, of course, 79 Falcon 9 flights, the 1 Falcon Heavy, and the 2 Starship missions. This was SpaceX's 121st orbital launch within the last 365 days. As we just mentioned, the 200th SpaceX orbital launch from Pad 40, and the 255th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. With a successful launch today, we bring that bar chart up to launch number 80 for Falcon flights. Moving on to some recovery stats, this was the 43rd landing of a booster at landing zone 1. That marked the 54th landing here in the Sunshine State. Also the 73rd landing for a booster when you combine those in California as well. Total marking the 339th overall SpaceX booster landing to date. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 58th orbital launch from Florida this year, the 86th from U.S. soil, the 95th from a U.S. rocket company, and launch number 150 from around the world, hitting that milestone thanks to the late-night launch of a Soyuz rocket, sending a cargo progress vehicle on a roughly 2-day jaunt up to the International Space Station to dock with the Russian segment of the ISS. Also been 6 orbital launch failures on the year, but here's where our pie chart stands now. 95 missions from the US, Russia ticking up to 9. So the US still has about 63% of the pie. China with 36 missions on the year, about a quarter. Russia with 9. Japan with 4. India and Iran with 2 apiece. And North Korea and the European Space Agency with 1 each as well. Want to thank our friends Pete Karsten with Max Q Productions and to Chuck and Jim Briggs for helping to support us with tracking views of the rocket today. Want to thank both Callistia Lee and Stephanie B. Good to see you, Stephanie. Appreciate you helping out with the live chat here. Again, for those wanting to continue tracking this mission, we will put this over on our 24-hour live streaming service, Launchpad Live. We'll have some light commentary on there as well at the point of separation, which again, for the first satellite is T plus 47 minutes, 21 seconds. And for the second of these two is at T plus 1 hour, 49 minutes, and 38 seconds. I want to thank our Adam Bernstein as well for his excellent tracking view as usual. To our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. You can see the transporter erector is now back upright as part of SpaceX's process of turning around this pad as quickly as possible. Finally, and most importantly, I want to thank you for wherever you're watching our live launch coverage from this morning. Can't do these broadcasts without you, and so we thank you for your continued support of what we do here at Spaceflight Now. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. We will see you over on Launchpad Live for payload deployment. And until then, folks, we will see you then. Bye-bye.